And welcome back to Hannity. So earlier today, Kellyanne Conway was verbally criticized while attempting to discuss the resignation of Mike Flynn. Watch this.
You're saying that was the straw that broke the camel's back, but the White House knew about that last month when the Justice Department warned the White House that Mr. Flynn or General Flynn had not been completely honest in characterizing that conversation with the Russian ambassador. And they even went further to say that as a result of that dishonesty, he was at risk for blackmailing by the Russians.
Well, that's one characterization, but the fact is that General Flynn continued in that position and was in the presidential daily briefings, was part of the leader calls as recently as yesterday, was there for the Prime Minister's visit from Canada yesterday, and as time wore on, obviously the situation had become unsustainable.
Kellyanne,
and General Flynn...
That makes no sense.
All right, joining us now with reaction from the White House, counsel to the President, Kellyanne Conway. You know, just one observation. We've been friends for over 2 decades. I've seen you on media appearances, and just my own thoughts that if somebody was a liberal and a woman and were treated in certain circumstances the way you've been treated, I think it would be news. Do you feel in any way the media has been extremely hostile to you?
I don't like to think that way. I am counselor to the President. I get tough questions. Any of us who represent him do. He certainly does. And tough is fine, but they should be fair. And actually just saying that I made no sense or it made no sense is inaccurate and unfair in this instance because, as our press secretary, Sean Spicer, said later in the daily briefing today, Sean, our White House counsel reviewed that information and concluded that this was not a legal matter. And ultimately, it was a matter of trust. It was an erosion of trust matter. It was not a legal matter that warranted further action at that moment. And so that's all I was trying to convey. And I was answering a couple of different questions. But I do find sometimes that there are conclusions in search of evidence. And you know, if we don't answer the question the way they want it answered, they ask it again, accuse us of not being credible or not answering a question. Look, sometimes you're asking a question that's not particularly relevant, but we're patiently trying to answer it. And often enough, we are answering the question, but maybe not just the way that you wanted it answered. But I'm not a big fan of talking about sexism and exclusion and all of that.
No,
I'm here to do a job.
Identity politics.
But I also think things started to shift too when I was a speaker at the March for Life. I saw a real change in tone and attitude among many people that, you know, I would go and speak at the March for Life, and of course Vice President Pence did as well, and he made history doing that. But that's all right. Sean, you know what? I just want the American people to see all the action this president is taking on their behalf. I mean, just today he had a listening session, a parent-teacher conference with parents and educators from private schools, public, charter, home schools. We have a new secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs. We have Linda McMahon over at SBA. She was just sworn in tonight. Steve Mnuchin last night at Treasury. The president just today, he rescinded some of these awful regulations in a really remarkable
I do think there's some truth
event.
Here.
So,
you know, one of the things, there's been a remarkable speed, I call it the speed of Trump, actually, or he's moving very quickly, and he's made a lot of accomplishments, but the media, as I said in my opening monologue tonight, they're more focused on attacking you and attacking Ivanka and Jared and Bannon and Miller and Gorka and even the 10-year-old son of the president. I want to go specifically to these leaks, though, because Time Magazine had it was a column today by Sam Frizzell. You know, this is not the first time leaks are coming from the intelligence community. Our friend Kenneth Timmerman actually wrote a piece. He wrote a book back some years ago about the Shadow Warriors. And Eli Lake, by the way, he wrote a piece today about the intelligence leaks. So my question to you is, where are these leaks coming from? Are they against the law? Is this, do you think, coming from people that are loyal to the former administration? And when does it stop because of the danger that's associated with these leaks? And is there going to be an investigation?
Well, the president made that very clear, I think, in a tweet and in other comments. The press secretary made it clear today. We're very concerned about leaks, particularly as goes intelligence and security information. And it's extremely concerning. It's not for me to say where they're coming from or whether there'll be an investigation, but it's obviously taken very seriously by our commander-in-chief and our president, because he has said as much as recently as this week. And he's right, Sean. We saw this before. We're seeing it again this week. The leaks within the intelligence and security, leaks about intelligence and security, I should say, it should concern everyone. And if people are running to the media to leak and not providing that information to the proper authorities, that should concern all of us. This is not a partisan
dangerous.
issue.
Kellyanne, that's
it's dangerous stuff. It's not a partisan issue. And I appreciate your opening questions to me as well, because all I see constantly is, whether it's any Trump administration official, it's so-and-so got grilled, so-and-so struggled, so-and-so contentious interview, see the tense exchange below. It's like, I guess that's great clickbait, but folks, let's focus on the real issues at hand, which is what the president is putting out there, these leaks.
Well, let me ask you one last question, because I know that you made an off-the-cuff comment. It was on Fox and Friends, and you talked about, and I do believe, I have friends inside of Nordstrom that told me that they believe it is political, what happened with Ivanka's line. And you said, okay, go buy Ivanka. And they're claiming that you violated the standards of conduct. I mean, is this really how trivial things are going to get? And what's your reaction to it?
I don't have a comment on the particular letter that's been sent or any type of investigation. And I've been very straightforward about that particular incident. And I'll leave it at that.
All right, Kellyanne, thank you for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And up next, we'll get more reaction to Michael Flynn's resignation, Rick Grinnell, Charlie Hurt, Nancy Soderberg. They'll join us, and then later tonight.
That's your point of view, Sean.
Wait, hang on a second.
But that's not the reality.
Here's the reality. This is the truth. Radical Islamists are at war with America. Last night, I went one-on-one with Jorge Ramos about the immigration crisis in our country. Later tonight, Geraldo.
The president was very concerned that General Flynn had misled the vice president and others. He was also very concerned, in light of sensitive subjects dealt with by that position of national security advisors like China, North Korea, and the Middle East, that the president must have complete and unwavering trust for the person in that position. The evolving and eroding level of trust as a result of this situation and a series of other questionable instances is what led the president to ask for General Flynn's resignation.
All right, that was White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer earlier today talking about retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn's resignation as National Security Advisor. Here now with reaction is former spokesperson for the U.S. Ambassador to the UN, Fox News contributor Rick Grinnell, Fox News contributor and opinion editor for the Washington Times, Charlie Hurt, and former Deputy National Security Advisor for President Clinton, former UN Ambassador, and the CEO of the Soderberg Global Solutions Group, and that's Nancy Soderberg. Good to see you all. Nancy, are you at all concerned, one intelligence leak after another? You concerned about that?
I always am. This has so many different levels to it. One, why were they listening in on Flynn's conversation with the Russians? They briefed the White House, so you don't know whether it was someone in the White House, someone in the Justice Department, somebody who told somebody who leaked it. I think there'll be real investigations. But this is going to quickly shift from Flynn's resignation to what kind of White House does President Trump want? There's, someone described it to me today as a Game of Thrones going on there. You've got two chiefs of staff. There's not, one side's not talking to another, and he's got a little war going on in there. And he's got to lead and decide what he wants to empower.
I think there's growing pains with any administration.
Absolutely.
And we've seen this in all past administrations, in all honesty. Rick, let me go to you from the standpoint of the intelligence aspect of this. And that's got to be troubling. This is not the first time. This is now the seventh time that major things are being leaked. That's against the law, number one. Number two, that's got to be troubling to any American citizen that their government is the one that's listening in on them and leaking it.
Yeah, it's really troublesome. And look, we've had a growing problem with politically motivated intel officers. Let's be very clear. Most of the intel officers are great Americans working very hard. But there are some who are more loyal to a political party. They were gaining ground during the Obama administration. But frankly, the Obama team didn't really crack down because most of the leaks benefited them. But with the election of Donald Trump, this has been blown wide open. We now have politically motivated intel officers leaking information about the president's calls. I mean, look at what was spun when the president spoke to the Australian head of state. It is really outrageous to have this activity going on in our intel community. We're not going to see the press crack down on this, frankly, because they benefit as well. Congress has a special responsibility here. They need to step up, and there needs to be some mature congressional representatives from both sides of the aisle to go in and crack down and start firing people who are leaking this information about U.S. officials.
Charlie, I guess the next logical question here is, okay, he didn't tell the whole truth to the vice president who asked him. The White House counsel said nothing illegal was done here. I mean, you're talking about a 1799 act that they're referring to, the Logan Act, that nobody have ever prosecuted under. So there's nothing criminal. They told them that, and then they spent a couple of weeks finding out what had truly happened and investigating it, and it results in an issue of trust, but based on leaked information. So what does that mean for the Trump White House?
Well, you know, obviously the Trump administration is dealing with a lot of, bureaucrats, people that are clearly leaking, not only for political purposes, but also specifically targeted at Mike Flynn with an effort to try to discredit him and to try to get him kicked out of the administration. That's a really huge thing. And I think it's important to remember, you know, as you pointed out...
Do you agree with me that they're going after targeting one by one everybody around Trump, and the ultimate goal is to get him?
They don't have to do it. They're doing it to themselves. Mike Flynn lied to the FBI. That's what's being investigated here. He apparently told the FBI a lie, which is a felony. So they're doing this
and so did Hillary Clinton, with all due respect. Hillary Clinton lied a lot.
I'll go one thing in the past.
And the media was not as hysterical about it.
Obama actually did prosecute leaks more aggressively than anyone else.
Okay.
It's interesting.
But the person most responsible for the biggest risk of national security was Hillary, and she got away with it, and the biggest pay-to-play.
Let's agree to disagree on that point. But on Flynn, I think there is an issue here of whether he lied to the FBI.
Well, I don't know.
There is to focus on the leaks here is not the main issue.
But let's also look at the underlying crime. You look at what Flynn supposedly did in terms of violating the Logan Act versus what what Hillary Clinton did after Benghazi. There's no comparison. Those things are so much more egregious.
The Logan Act, I agree. I've been on presidential transitions. Everybody has those discussions that no one was going to prosecute Mike Flynn for talking about that. As in everything, it's about the cover-up, not the original sin. Had he been honest, we wouldn't have this mess.
And that's what the Trump administration said. But if the intelligence didn't get leaked, we wouldn't be here at all. Guys, good to see you all. Thank you. And coming up next tonight on this busy news night right here on Hannity.
That's your point of view, Sean.
Wait, hang on a second.
But that's not the reality.
Here's the reality. This is a truth. Radical Islamists are at war with America. Jorge Ramos and I had a very heated one-on-one debate last night about illegal immigration. We'll get reaction from Geraldo Rivera, Bo Dietl, and also later tonight.
We will defeat radical Islamic terrorism, and we will not allow it to take root in our country. We're not going to allow it.
President Trump, he's not afraid to use the term radical Islam, and now a former State Department official is explaining why the phrase was never used during the Obama administration. You want to hear what it is? Straight ahead.